I found out I was being fired from the calendar invite. There was no subject line like performance discussion or review of Q3. It just read transition discussion, required attendance. No further context. Just a 30-minute block dropped onto my Outlook calendar at 3:27 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember the exact time because I stared at that notification for almost 10 full minutes without opening it. I thought maybe it was sent to the wrong Daniel. There were two of us at Brightspan. The other guy worked in marketing. I even hovered over the organizer's name to check. No mistake. The air in my office felt suddenly thick. Not hot, just dense, like something had quietly shifted and was pushing inward. My fingers floated above the keyboard, but I wasn't typing anymore. Slack was still open. A few unread messages, nothing urgent, no indicators, no clues. Just that lone invite blinking in the center of my screen like a heartbeat. I didn't click accept, I didn't reply. I just closed my laptop, stood up, and walked out like I was headed to the break room. I didn't come back that day. My name is Daniel Markham. I'm 42 years old, and until the end of last year, I was Director of Engineering at Brightspan Technologies in Milwaukee. I held that title for nearly 7 years. I built the architecture for our cloud migration, led the back-end team through 2 major platform overhauls, and hired over half the current engineering staff myself. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't political, but I was reliable, thorough, grounded. The moment everything shifted wasn't actually the calendar invite. It happened 2 weeks earlier. It was during the Friday all-hands right before the weekend. These meetings were always the same, some stats, a few slides, 1 or 2 shout-outs from upper leadership, then some vague call to keep innovating. They used to mention my team by name. Engineering shipped XYZ ahead of schedule, or Daniel's team solved the load balancing issue. Not that Friday. That Friday, my team's work was presented as if it had been dropped from the sky. No attribution, no mention. Just slide, next slide, move along. I remember looking around the room. A few of my engineers gave me side eyes like they noticed it too, but weren't sure if it meant anything. I shrugged it off, told myself I was being paranoid. It had been a long quarter. Maybe it was just an oversight, but my stomach didn't believe me. It churned that whole weekend. Up until then, I thought I knew what I was. A quiet professional, not the kind that needed applause, but the kind you wanted in the trench beside you when a server fell over at 2 a.m. I prided myself on that kind of presence, the calm one, the dependable one. My team trusted me. I mentored them not just technically, but personally. We had a Slack channel just for mental health check-ins. We met one-on-one weekly. I made space for their bad days. I covered when they needed to be human. Outside of work, my life was simple in the best way. I had a house near the river with my wife, Anna. We'd been married 15 years. No kids, but not by default, it was a decision. 2 rescue dogs, a Japanese maple in the backyard, 1 Weber grill I loved too much. We shared a Google Calendar religiously color-coded for work, family, and leave me alone time, as Anna jokingly called it. Weekends were for yard work, movies, and the occasional camping trip when we could both unplug long enough to pretend there wasn't Wi-Fi within 10 miles. I didn't think I was naive, but I was. Because I believed if you did your work, if you were loyal and thorough and stayed out of office drama, you'd be okay. You didn't have to climb over people, you just had to keep showing up. Then the signs started. At first they were nothing. A skipped invite here. A vague "we'll loop you in later" there. I noticed that one of my senior engineers had stopped CCing me on project updates, even though I was still their direct report. I asked about it once casually and got a sheepish, "Oh, thought you were already in the loop." The kind of response that's hard to challenge without sounding insecure. Then someone from HR mentioned a policy change. PTO requests had to be submitted through the new portal, not email. But I hadn't gotten the memo. I checked. Nothing in my inbox, not in spam. I asked if it had been announced in Slack. Yeah, it went out company-wide, they said. I showed them my inbox. Empty. No answer. The strangest part was the badge reader. One morning it beeped red when I tried to enter the secondary server room. It had never done that before. I assumed it was a glitch. Facilities reset it. The next week it happened again, this time at the main engineering wing. Facilities said it was a permissions resync. I nodded, but I felt it. That tightening, like someone was slowly erasing me in real time. I tried to stay composed. I told myself every organization has turbulence. People make mistakes. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the ops team had just messed up the access list. Maybe HR was scrambling and forgot to copy me. Maybe. But there were too many maybes. There was a week in September when my Slack DMs went unusually quiet. No one pinged me for code review. No one asked for sign-off. I sent a message to one of my leads, Alex, a sharp guy I'd mentored since he was fresh out of school. Need any support on the Jenkins pipeline stuff? He responded 3 hours later with all set thanks. It felt final, like a brush-off. That was new. Then the Thursday came, and that calendar invite landed like a bullet without sound. It wasn't from my direct manager. It was from someone in People Ops, a name I barely recognized. Transition discussion. No additional information. I checked the recipient list, just me. No notes. No attachments. I called Anna on the drive home that night. I didn't tell her everything, just said I might need to take a few days off next week. She asked if I was sick. I said not exactly. I sat in the driveway with the engine off for almost 2 hours. The sky turned dark before I realized I hadn't moved. My hands were gripping the steering wheel like I was bracing for impact. Because I was. The meeting lasted 13 minutes, not 30, not even 20. 13 minutes. They had it scripted, I could tell. The woman from People Ops, her name was Cheryl, I remember now, read most of it from a legal-sized notepad. Her voice was even mechanical. She said things like, "We've appreciated your contributions, and unfortunately, due to recent operational misalignments, we're moving in a different direction." Operational misalignments, that was the phrase. She said it like it meant nothing. There was another man in the room, Derek Ashford, VP of Product. I'd interacted with him maybe 4 times in my entire tenure. He didn't look at me directly, just kept nodding slightly like he was agreeing with a podcast only he could hear. He didn't speak until the last minute. That's when he slid a branded folder across the table and said, "This is a standard separation agreement, includes a 3-month severance package. We'd appreciate your signature by Monday." I didn't say much, just asked one question. Was this because of the tool leak? Cheryl hesitated. She looked at Derek. He blinked slowly, then said, "There have been concerns about how certain responsibilities were handled. Ultimately, it's a matter of leadership alignment." Leadership alignment. Another phrase that means exactly nothing. But I knew what they were referring to. 6 months earlier, I'd submitted a written report to the CISO and engineering security outlining a vulnerability in our internal debugging tool, one that left portions of sensitive client logs exposed if specific URLs were cached without token expiry. I didn't bury it. I flagged it with red tags, linked supporting Jira tickets, even offered 2 patch options. The issue had been downplayed. Low risk due to internal access controls, they said. No follow-up, no mitigation. And then 3 months later, we had a breach. Minor technically, but embarrassing. A junior QA team member had copied a test string from a cached log file and pasted it in a Stack Overflow thread. Someone scraped it. Someone noticed. It wasn't the QA's fault. The tool should have expired those logs by design. But when the incident response memo went out, the phrase engineering oversight appeared 4 times. They never mentioned my name, but they didn't need to. I signed the papers. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't flip any tables. I think that confused them. They were probably expecting some kind of confrontation. I've found that silence unnerves people more than outrage, especially corporate people. They understand legal threats and emotional outbursts. But they don't know what to do when someone simply nods, gathers their things, and walks out without a word. Back at home, I told Anna everything. We sat on the back porch for a long time. It was one of those early October evenings that carries the scent of wood smoke and dry leaves. She didn't say much, just held my hand. At one point she asked, "Do you think they'll realize what they did?" I shook my head. I don't think they care. The first week after was hollow. I didn't touch my laptop, didn't check Slack or email. I unsubscribed from the company's newsletter, took the dogs for longer walks, cooked dinner every night even when I didn't feel like eating. The house was quiet in a different way now, like something had been unplugged and the hum hadn't quite faded. But the quiet didn't bring peace. It brought echoes. I started replaying everything. The missed meetings, the badge glitches, the tension in Alex's voice that day when he said he didn't need help, the way my name had been erased slowly, methodically. I realized it hadn't been sudden. It had been a narrowing hallway, and every step I'd taken had made it smaller. I pulled up the old email, the one I'd sent about the vulnerability. I opened it like someone looking at an autopsy photo. There it was, time-stamped, documented, archived. I read it 3 times. It wasn't just a CYA message. It was thorough, detailed, respectful, professional. I scrolled further back, found the follow-up thread where security dismissed it, found the JIRA tickets, the Slack messages from team leads who acknowledged it. All of it. I started saving things. I made copies, printed them, annotated them. I bought a used HP laser printer off Craigslist for $30 and turned the guest room into a document graveyard. I wasn't plotting revenge. Not really. I just couldn't stand the idea that the truth might get lost, that they'd crafted a version of the story that would stick, and that my silence would make it real. Some nights I sat there staring at the printed emails like a detective in a movie without a case to solve. I wasn't trying to catch anyone. I just needed to prove, at least to myself, that I hadn't imagined it, that I hadn't failed, that I'd warned them, that someone had to have known. I met with a lawyer in Madison, not to sue, just to ask. She looked over the severance papers and said I'd technically signed away most of my rights to speak publicly, but that internal documentation showing I'd reported the issue might still offer protection under whistleblower laws, especially if I didn't accuse anyone by name. I asked her what would happen if I went to the press. She took a deep breath and said, "They'll try to discredit you. Maybe not directly, maybe quietly, but it won't be clean." I nodded. I wasn't expecting clean. I just wanted the record corrected. There's a silence that comes after you decide to act, but before anything happens. It's different from grief. It's not numbness. It's precision. Like your mind goes into a low hum, focusing only on what matters. No more what-ifs, no more spirals. Just forward. I found her by accident. Caitlin Ryerson, tech reporter for the Milwaukee Ledger. I'd read a piece she wrote 2 years ago about a whistleblower at a biotech firm, smart, restrained, honest. No hero worship, no vendettas, just facts. I remembered thinking at the time, this is how you do it. I sent her an email from a burner account. Brief. Just said I was a recently dismissed engineering director from a Wisconsin tech firm, and that I had documentation relevant to a recent internal breach that had not been disclosed accurately to investors. I didn't say which firm. I didn't include attachments. I just left my Proton mail address and waited. She replied in 48 minutes, We met at a library in Wauwatosa. I chose the location because it had private study rooms and no security cameras in the parking lot. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s. Wireframe glasses, fleece-lined jacket, voice like someone who never raises it unless she absolutely has to. She didn't ask for details until we were inside and seated. She just slid a recorder across the table and said, "When you're ready." I brought the folder, 17 printed emails, 3 annotated Jira threads, a Slack export from my team's private channel, 2 calendar screenshots, a personal memo I'd written the day after the breach when the internal blame game started. She didn't flinch at the volume. She read. Silently, occasionally underlining something in pencil. At one point she stopped and asked, "Did they ever acknowledge your report in writing?" I nodded and pointed to one of the emails. She circled it, hard. We met 3 more times. Each time she asked more specific questions. She asked about the timeline, the decision makers, the infrastructure stack, the security protocols. She was technical enough to follow without getting lost and cautious enough to fact-check everything I said. She even contacted 2 former engineers who had since left the company. They corroborated the timeline, said they remembered the issue being flagged, remembered me being frozen out after it. She never promised a story, not once. She just said, "If this runs, it needs to be airtight." I respected that. The piece was published 6 weeks later, Sunday morning edition. Middle of the front page beneath the fold. Headline read, "Fired for telling the truth, one engineer's documentation challenges Brightspan's internal narrative." It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. Within 3 days, 2 board members had issued internal requests for an independent review. The CTO released a statement to employees saying they took all concerns seriously and were committed to transparency. That same week, the VP of Product Derek Ashford announced he was taking an indefinite leave to focus on family. I watched it unfold quietly. I didn't tweet, didn't comment, didn't email anyone. Anna read the article first. She cried, but not the way I expected. She didn't cry because we'd won anything. She cried because for the first time someone else had written down what I'd been carrying. My former team never reached out. I didn't expect them to. I knew what it was like in those walls, how fear warps loyalty, how silence becomes survival. I didn't blame them, not even Alex. People do what they have to when the walls start closing in. I got a job offer 2 months later, a smaller firm, fully remote, different sector. They'd read the article, said they wanted someone with spine. I thanked them but declined, not because I was bitter, just because I wasn't ready to go back inside another building with badge readers and invisible lines of power. Not yet. I spent that winter walking. Just walking. Sometimes through the snow, sometimes through the empty industrial parks near the lake. I didn't listen to music, didn't take calls. I just walked. That's when I realized something. It wasn't the firing that broke me, it was the rewriting. The way they twisted the story just enough to make it plausible, just enough to seed doubt. The way they spoke in corporate phrases so devoid of detail they became their own kind of violence. Leadership alignment, performance trajectory, cultural fit, these aren't just euphemisms. They're shields. They let people commit quiet cruelty without ever having to raise their voice. That's what I wanted to destroy. Not the company, not the people, just the lie. I never expected vindication. That's not why I spoke. There's this myth people tell themselves about whistleblowers that we want revenge or glory or some twisted version of attention. But that's not it. At least not for me. I just didn't want the silence to win. When people ask what it felt like, I always think of that sound a house makes when it settles in winter. That deep, slow groan in the frame when the temperature drops and the wood shifts ever so slightly. That's what it felt like inside me. Something old adjusting to something cold. After the story came out, things got quiet again. Not just externally, internally. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I'd spoken. The record had been corrected. Not loudly, not permanently, but enough. I wasn't trying to reclaim my reputation. I wasn't trying to be believed. I just wanted the truth to sit on the table next to the lie and let people decide which one to pick up. Anna said I seemed lighter. I think that was her way of saying I stopped clenching my jaw in my sleep. We traveled some, not far, just enough to feel like the world was bigger than boardrooms and source control. We drove north to Door County in January, saw the lake freeze over. I watched her take photos of broken ice patterns along the shore. I didn't think about engineering once that whole weekend. Not once. But I did think about the people I left behind. The ones still in that building. The ones who had seen what I'd seen but didn't have a folder full of timestamps or the luxury to walk away. The ones with kids in daycare and mortgages riding on company health plans. The ones who had to sit through Monday morning stand-ups pretending they hadn't read the article. There's a cost to speaking. But there's also a cost to staying silent. It doesn't show up on pay stubs or performance reviews. It shows up in your posture, in your sleep patterns, and how often you rehearse what you should have said even years later. I kept all the printed documents. Not because I needed them anymore, but because some truth shouldn't be stored on a hard drive. One day they'll probably end up in a box in the garage, yellowing quietly under a label that says MISC. But for now, they sit on a shelf in the guest room, neither hidden nor displayed. I still get emails sometimes, from people who read the article months after the fact. Strangers. One man from Boston who said he'd been pushed out of his company after flagging a data compliance issue. A woman in Phoenix who'd watched her whole department get laid off and then rehired under different titles to skirt severance laws. They don't ask for advice. They just write to say I saw it too. That's what matters. Not being right, being seen. When the snow finally melted, I went back to the office building. Not inside, just to the parking lot. I parked in my old spot and sat there for a while. The building looked exactly the same. Glass panels, corporate font, someone's Tesla plugged into the charging station like a badge of progress. I imagined the all-hands meeting happening inside, someone clicking through a PowerPoint while another person tried not to yawn. I wondered if anyone remembered my name. Probably not. But that's the thing about institutions, they forget faster than people do. And people forget faster than pain does. Before I left, I rolled down the window and just listened. There was wind, some bird calls, faint hum of HVAC units on the roof. But mostly there was silence. And for the first time in months, that silence didn't sound like absence. It sounded like peace. It's been over a year now. Some days it feels like it happened to someone else. Other days it's still in my bloodstream, like the memory is a splinter that hasn't worked its way out yet, just dulled enough to live with. I never went back into tech, not full-time. I do some freelance code review, a bit of systems consulting for small nonprofits that can't afford big contracts. But mostly I spend time with people, real people, not avatars behind Slack icons, not senior directors trying to pivot to market fit, just people who build things with their hands. Anna's brother owns a woodworking shop. I help him on weekends. I've learned more about cedar joints and resin curing in 6 months than I learned about Kubernetes in 6 years. I don't miss the noise. I do miss the team, though. Not the politics, not the hierarchy, just the people. The late nights debugging over pizza. The shared feeling when a fix finally deployed clean. The kind of trust you only build through shared stress and small wins. I miss that. But I know now that you can miss something and still be better without it. People sometimes ask me if I'd do it again. The answer is yes. But not because it felt good, it didn't. It felt terrifying, lonely, like walking out into a snowstorm naked and not knowing if anyone would come looking. But I'd still do it, because silence doesn't save you, it only delays the reckoning. I think about all the little phrases that chipped away he's not quite aligned with leadership. We're shifting priorities. This is a strategic transition. None of them ever meant what they said, but they were powerful in their vagueness. That's how institutions protect themselves. They wrap injustice in soft language and hope no one asks too many questions. And most of the time, no one does. That's why I spoke. Not to burn the house down, just to shine a light on the rot in the beams. I walk most mornings now. There's a trail near our house, nothing fancy. Just gravel and pine and the occasional deer track. I don't bring my phone, I don't check messages, I just walk. Sometimes with the dogs, sometimes alone. And I breathe. I breathe like someone who didn't think he'd ever get to again without feeling the weight of what he left behind. There's a spot on the trail where the trees break and the light comes in low and gold. That's where I usually stop. I just stand there for a minute and let the stillness settle. That's where this story lives now, not in court filings, not in Slack threads, not even in print. Just in that one quiet moment where truth exists without permission. If this story felt familiar, I hope you know you're not alone. I don't tell it for attention. I tell it so the next man doesn't think he's the only one. Every view brings another voice out of hiding. And that, I think, is enough. For now, at least. That's enough.